Anyhow, we have the Wednesday, but now it's Thursday night Q&A session.
Motley crew.
A motley crew. We've got half a dozen. And really, this is just a general chit-chat question. What's going on? I had a couple of questions thrown at me, but they're the usual ones about winners and losers and what the best are doing. But I'm really just happy to chat through what's going on. What are you seeing, Paul, at the moment?
In some ways, a return to normality in terms of people starting to make inquiries about stuff and talk about projects. But I'm sort of questioning if they're ever going to convert, because even clients who we've got projects that we're talking to us about, they're not quite sure when they're going to get their own budgets approved and stuff like that. So my confidence in pipeline is sort of, I'm not sure how confident I should be or shouldn't be. But actually our sort of turnover in August is a little bit down, which it always is, quite frankly, every year. So, and then it goes back up again in September and October. So I'm sort of, I don't know, it feels like normality for me, but and then having been on a few other things with other agency owners, I know that I'm fairly, I'm not, that's not necessarily normal. It's for some, but not for others. Nobody wants to go back to work though, or nobody go back to the office, I should say. And that means I'm sort of handing my notice in on some offices, just because even if I want them again in a year's time, I might as well save in the meantime.
Offices are bargain prices at the moment. you can get holidays.
Spending 18 grand a month on offices, so it's just.
Yeah, I mean it is, and people aren't going to come back, and the large people aren't using offices. So
the challenge I've got is that some of them know they want to come back soon, and some of them want to come in some of the time. But if they do come in, they only want to come in if everyone else is there. So I'm having to have these offices so that they're there. In theory, they want you to have a nice office for them to come into on the odd occasion.
So why don't you just book out the
Ritz,
the wedding room at the Hilton with desks all the way around, and just book it once a week on a Monday afternoon or something?
Well, I mean that's where I'm coming from. Is I'd rather do something like that suits people rather than make the square peg fit in the round hole, if you like. And even if you like say that's more frequent but smaller gatherings that are in locations that are on mainline stations rather than having to get on a tube and stuff like that. I'd rather do that. But what we're sort of discussing is when you look at the mental health side of it, and there's been some discussion on the news I noticed today about there is quite an important mental health issue around people becoming danger of becoming agoraphobic as a result of this, and how how it makes it difficult for people who are joining the company, or how young people don't get to learn off their peers and all that sort of thing. It feels like even if there's a bunch of us, I'm just looking around the screen to say this, middle-aged people who are quite happy doing this. I actually think that I know my 20-odd-year-old daughter and that are looking at it in a very different perspective, the fact that they can't be with their friends and all the rest of it. And I'd challenge anyone who's trying to get their first job or whatever, this would be a horrible way to start your career.
Well, I mean, you can't learn on the job. So you can't pick up company culture, company values, down the line. And then, I mean, the reality is that lots of these, and I can say it because we're in an older room today, the reality is that these kids have probably got their laptop on their ironing board while sitting on their bed, and we do actually have a duty, the duty of care, or at best they're sitting on their bed or their sofa in their pyjamas with their laptop on their knees, and that's just wrong.
So I think there is a cost, as much as we operationally can work quite effectively and efficiently like this, I think there'll be a long-term cost which we've got to watch out for.
How do you deal with that, Philippa? How do you deal with dealing with the youngsters? And unmute yourself, my love.
Yeah, hi. Sorry, I'm late. Thanks for diving me into that one. I presume you're talking about returning to workplace or not. So at the moment, a couple of my clients have actually decided to open the office, work out how many people they can have in it max, and to do it social distance and all those sorts of things, to not insist that people have to go in at all. But it's very particular they've done it for the younger guys, because actually it's the younger guys that have really been struggling. And so what they've done is basically given them choice. So if the younger guys want to go in, then actually they can. Indeed, anyone else who wants to go in, they can, at least to create a bit of a sort of bringing, even if they're not all in it, they're in a sort of a central, they're in a place where they can, you know, interact with a few other people in the business. So because I presume what you've been talking about is that challenge, and certainly in what I'm finding is that it's the younger people in the businesses that are starting to find it hardest, particularly if they're on their own or living in a flat share or something like that, or even sort of stuck at home, really.
Yeah, I mean that's the same with us. It's either that, or they've got the other end of the spectrum, maybe, where they've got a family with 3 kids hanging off their ears whilst they're trying to get stuff done, and it's just
that's the other one, exactly. That almost without exception, those are the 2 main problematic ones. And on the second one, that's a hard one to solve. Again, another client of mine who actually has decided to shut down the lease on their Soho premises. In fact, instead what they're doing is taking space with business space, so that actually, again, because people with kids, hopefully particularly once schools go back, you know, actually if people just need to get away and want to be somewhere, then actually either they can come back into, so with some clients who open their offices, they can go back there, and or actually what they're doing is making space available through this business space setup, so that actually those who need to use it can.
Yeah, that's what we're looking at. We already kind of got membership with the office group, and they've got quite a lot of offices in a lot of places, and they're all a lot of them are in railway stations, because they took over the lease from, I don't know what it was, British Rail or whatever, a long time ago. So actually you can get to a lot of their offices without just coming straight into Victoria or Waterloo or St Pancras or any of them.
And the person, exactly, and the person who's closed, who's not renewed their contract, their lease, if you like, what they're doing is they're using that as a starting point, actually, to invite everyone to come in. So there's an initial sort of regrouping, if you like, those who are up for doing so, as a starting point then to work out how to move forward, whether it's rotating or whatever it might be. So.
I know David Gilroy, if he's there behind that shiny photo, we'll soon find out. At the moment, he's he's back to work, I think, aren't you, David?
His orange t-shirt on.
He's always got his orange t-shirt on.
Nothing wrong with t-shirts.
Yeah, we can hear you. Can't see you yet, though, other than you're still.
Is Helen on the call, Robert?
Is Helen on the call? No.
No.
Okay. So I'm just driving past Shifnal.
Right.
Which I don't know what she is. I'm currently on the A41. It's taking me 3 hours to do 100 miles. So I won't chip in very much, but I'll treat this like a podcast.
Can you just tell us what you're doing with Back to Work, David?
Yeah, so we're 40 people, office in Bristol. We've got 2 in so far, and that's because their work from home was particularly suboptimal, their setups. And we're counselling views next week on who else is desperate to get back in now. They've been in as a pilot for the last 6 weeks, make sure we've got temperature checks, antibacterial stuff all sorted, and just knowing how the building's doing. We're in a 5-floor building. So we'll probably let 10 to 12 back in, and it'll be the same 10 to 12. So we're not going to do a rota. I think that's the worst of all worlds, to have 10 in today or 20 in today and 20 in tomorrow. And I reckon out of 40 people, we've got 10 or 15 who just aren't bothered about going into the office yet. So what we've done last week, this week and next week is we're doing 3 locations around the city, and we're doing social distancing, face-to-face, couple of hours in the afternoon catch-ups. In our infinite wisdom, we've bought a 6-metre by 3-metre orange gazebo, which sounded perfectly big enough. It turns out it's so heavy I can only just lift it into the car by myself. So we're kind of doing that as an alternative for at least some face-to-face now, because we've got some people, happy to do that and generally taking a little bit more risk in their lives in terms of going out, including the 23-year-old who in the first week of Eat Out to Help Out did 3 breakfasts, 3 lunches and 3 dinners in the first 3 days.
What's your pipeline like? What's going on with biz dev? in general terms? What's the market for you?
Well, we're single sector business, as some of you know, just in legal. We've had a pretty consistent flow of smaller projects. You know, we've talked, if a big website project for us is 50 grand, we're getting projects at 15 to 20. Lots and lots of small projects for existing clients. I mean, just this week alone, we've opened £7,500 worth of small projects. And in the first 3 weeks of the month, we'd only opened 7,500 in total. So that's the one bit that we're really focusing on. So overall, we're still down 40 grand a month in retainers, but in actual revenue terms, this month will only be down about 25,000. So we're in effect 15,000 a month ahead of where our low point in retainers took us at the end of April. And that's a combination of new customers and a little bit of increased spend from existing customers who didn't pull their spend in the first place.
And if you don't mind my asking, David, were those new customers kind of already in the pipeline, or are they kind of post March customers?
No, this is all post March, Rob. So, no. In there, there'll be a few early on, but the ones in June, July, and August, they're all stuff that has just come in through. You know, we've always had a strong pipeline from an SEO perspective. We doubled our own paid advertising spend, and I did that on a pilot basis for 3 days. And then at the end of day 3, brought my new business guy back off furlough because I was having to do too much sales work. It was that instant an effect.
It's a nice problem to have.
Yeah. So, and he was the happiest man alive, because he actually thought he was never coming back. He admitted to me at some point in the last 2 months. So I don't have specific numbers to hand. I could get them for the next time we speak, but it's actually it is a pretty consistent flow, and even a couple of old leads coming back that we thought had died pre-COVID, and they've kind of got back on saying, well, actually, we didn't do anything. Could we restart the conversation? So that's been good.
Okay.
But as we all know, lawyers are bastards. They can make money in any market.
Cool. Nice. Peter.
I just wondered what everybody was doing about bad debts, doubtful debts, unbilled work that you're now catching up with, that you're, going back 2 years and you're saying, well, actually, under our T's and C's, we can now bill this and we're going to bill it. All that sort of stuff. Or am I the only person with these sorts of issues, or are you all Vestal virgins in the correct billing department?
I haven't. Unfortunately, we've had to stay really tight with people and get a bit bullish about not continuing unless they pay the one that's already 3 months old and stuff like that. But fortunately, probably some of what we do with them is mission critical enough. They've had to weaken, but I think every FD in the land is probably trying to pay Peter and Paul at the same time at the moment. So we've just got really bullish, and it's not being unkind, it's just being professional. Fortunately, we haven't got any sort of long-standing old debt. We actually do have an insurance for that. Not that might help you now after the fact, but it's something we took out a year or so ago. Actually, when we were starting to work with the Middle East, we thought it was a wise thing to do. That then will pay out if the client has not paid after 90 days. We can claim on that. It's sort of like almost a bit like factoring, but not quite the same.
Any other thoughts?
And what's quite nice is, as part of that service, the companies that you're doing, they then monitor, and then you get an update on their credit rating. So if a customer who does owe you money kind of lowers on their credit score or whatever, then you get a bit of a heads up about it as well.
Any other thoughts on debt collection? Everyone's just watching.
It's you.
Yes, David.
We got really strict really quickly. I mean, I'm talking back in March, and just phoned every single customer who had an outstanding invoice to make sure they had it. And I had my account managers do that. So when we went into collections mode the following week or two, there was no excuse. We made half a dozen threats to shut down websites. We actually did shut down 2 of them. for approximately 20 minutes before the back payment arrived, with a comment that I've heard once before, which was, "We never actually thought you'd do it." And again, these are lawyers, remember. So, and for people who are consistently bad payers, as in they pay at 90 days, not at 30, as long as they are consistently paying at 90 days, and we're not talking about massive invoices, we're talking about 4 or 5 grand a month maximum, then we have been able to absorb it, but have told them that's what we're doing. But they're probably 10-year-old customers. So for anybody new, we have stopped work on 2 projects until they pay the outstanding invoices.
Good. Like it. I think that one of the interests, just going back to the biz dev debate, I had a conversation with Gary Sullivan at Equator at Glasgow and London, and he was saying that, like, pre-COVID, they would run a webinar and they'd have 100 people at the webinar in a hotel, and they'd feed the people and give them coffee and give them goodie bags, and they'd send them handwritten invitations, and then they'd follow up all the 100 people by phone and then by email, and then they'd spend, let's just keep the numbers really, really simple. Let's just say they spent £10,000 on the event for the 100 people, and they end up getting 10 sales qualified leads out of that, and out of that they get sort of 5 pieces of work. And he's saying that post-COVID, now it's just you send out to your network for a webinar that you run, you get 100 people turn up, you get 10 sales qualified leads that you convert to 5. So the actual cost of those sales qualified leads has crashed from 10% of 10,000 quid to 10% of a couple of £100. Now the difficulty, of course, is that, as demonstrated by the number of people on this call, is that everyone is just totally webinared out. Everyone's just, the last thing anyone wants to do is stare at their own face on a screen, or most of the mediums of call. But I think the really interesting thing, that cost of customer acquisition technically can be much lower in that sense. I was just wondering what people thought about that. And how are you getting your customers these days? Has it changed?
Yes, so I was going to say we're Northern Ireland based, as you probably pick up fairly quick from the accent. We're getting a lot of business from people wanting to move online, to sell online that hadn't been selling online before, and a lot of the councils are offering grants that support, getting businesses getting ready for continued COVID or for a second lockdown, and e-commerce has been allowed as part of the grant. So we're getting a lot of inquiries through that. I don't know, are you guys getting that in England?
It's not quite the same. Go on, Ariel.
Yeah, no, we actually, I must admit, the last 2 months have been the largest amount of leads we've been getting since ever, and especially from people moving from offline to online. Really, I was thinking of starting sort of lead generation, but we just been trying to keep up with just the natural lead just coming out of that element. I don't know how long that will last and how sustainable that is, but yeah, we're getting quite it's amazing amount of inquiries of people, of businesses that suddenly are switching over. So that's actually allowed us to pretty much grow now. We actually exceeded the numbers from before COVID. So I'm just hoping that the existing clients, as soon as they pick up to pre-levels, then we should be actually flying actually. So the moment
can I ask both of you, are they kind of, what sort of, just give me an idea, what sort of project sizes are they? Are they small startups, or are they medium, and what sort of kind of things are they? A bit of everything?
My one actually are pretty large. I mean, those are, based in South Africa, so these are companies which turn over multi-billion, because these are because what we're finding out is a lot of companies are moving the strategy. A lot of relationships are broken down between distributors and wholesalers because of COVID. And yeah,
So these are manufacturers who want to move from B2B to B2C, yeah.
B2C, yeah. So they're experimenting. I mean, sort of, I think it's the usual thing. A lot of them, I mean, I don't know how successful they're going to be, or how, you know, there's a lot of optimism in the approach, but I mean, that's what I'm saying. I'm not sure how long this is going to last for, but it's definitely, there's a massive amount of interest. It's been, almost everyone I spoke to over here has seen a very similar trend. So from small people to big, to fairly big companies. We generally deal with big companies, so we generally tend to get sort of the leads from fairly large.
And where? Sorry, where are you? Are you in the UK?
Cape Town.
Where? Sorry.
Cape Town.
Cape Town. Oh, right. Sorry. Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah. So yeah. So I must admit, yeah, it's been quite surprising, and yeah, I'm thankful for that as well. But yeah, so it's been quite interesting. The interest level that gone up. Yeah, and just in the previous question as well, I mean, in terms of I'm been in the office by myself for the last 4 months. Everyone is working from home. Although we made it available for everyone who wants to come, they can come. Everyone has chosen to stay at home. Even actually now the traffic is so light, it's actually quite easy to get to, because sometimes it would be an hour to drive here, another could do it in 20 minutes, but everyone still chooses to work from home. And yeah, it's going to be a bit more challenging now with the training. I'm trying to figure that out, because yeah, that's something that we'll have to discover in terms of how easy it is to train all the youngsters actually. So far it's been working, but it's so far I don't know if it's been working because we cannot monitor as closely. So that's what I think. Yeah.
And just for me, Paul, sorry, Robert, just to answer Paul, to answer your question. For me, I am probably talking about smaller projects, the 10 to 20 grand projects, and the council is funding up to say 50% of those.
And I have seen there are grants like that for that sort of smaller size. I've seen in the UK. So maybe we just not seeing it yet, or maybe I'm not seeing it because of the size of agency we are.
Possibly. It also tying in with the timing, the Magento 2, we're getting a lot of people coming off Magento 1.9 over to Magento 2. So I know that specifics are that we happen to do Magento, but it's it all fits in with good timing.
And I got a question for Ariel, which is and for everyone really, which is more of the work about digital transformation rather than pure digital marketing? Is there
it's interesting. We actually started to get, although we've been doing a lot of digital transformation and strategy as part of our marketing, it's actually now we're actually starting to get purely consulting on digital transformation as well. Good. So it's actually because of that element, yeah. So it's been quite interesting. It's quite nice actually to get it on a pure strategy level. So we got a couple of clients which approach us pure like, can we hold their hand, basically through the process of, like now I had to run one client, they asked me, the CEO of the group asked me to help convince all the other CEOs of all the subgroups in terms of how do you need to help them hurry along the digital path. So they want someone that they can talk to, that has been through the process, that helps them sort of map out what's a rational strategy. So yeah, so it's actually, so the interesting thing is that the strategy element is playing a bigger part, which is quite satisfying. For a long time I was trying to convince people they need to do it, and no one actually wants to do it, and now suddenly it just seemed to be happening by itself. So that's actually quite interesting. Yeah.
And do you and sorry, so two questions. Firstly, what's the head count of the agency? And secondly, when you say strategy, are we talking about the marketing strategy or are we talking about the transformation strategy?
It's both, but the initial thing, the size of the agency, we are 25.
Right.
25 people. The strategy has been both in the marketing, but what you find people who are transitioning to, especially like wholesalers or distributors who are transitioning, you actually need to give them a bit of a broader strategy just in terms of understanding the problems of moving online, in terms of just the scale of things a little bit different. So it's a different set of problems that they're not familiar with in terms of dealing with customers rather than businesses. So there's an element of it is about helping this, just because we got expertise in that as well, that element of moving from that you can manage with systems which maybe are based, even on a big organization, they are based on accounting system on one end and Excel for other stuff, to the fact that now you actually need to have an integrated system. So there's that element of the digital process that you have to map that out, because otherwise they're going to hit roadblocks almost as soon as you start marketing. So we need to deal with that first. Otherwise, otherwise it would be. I've done project in the past, and if that's not sorted out, it becomes dead in the water. As soon as you start advertising, the volume goes up, and they cannot. If they're not used to this level of distribution, it's a different game. Selling to 1,000 customers versus small one versus 10 big ones. So so that there's that element of digital transformation that they have to take it more seriously than they're used to.
Cool. Good. What else? What other questions have you got here? You've come in for a Q&A, so there must be some questions you've got looming in your minds about what's going on.
Who thinks it's going to get worse in Q4 2020 and Q1 2021 in terms of the overall economy?
Is the economy going to be worse in Q4 than it is in Q1, is your question?
Well,
I think it's going to
get.
My gut feel is going to get hammered over here, at least in South Africa, because the government is bankrupt by now. And all the short-term money, all the unemployment fund that was not much, but it was something. So we can already see on the leading indicators in terms of debt, going debt ratios, all that sort of stuff is actually, there's been a little bit of a euphoria in terms of people pent up demand, which was for a month or two was pushed it up, but now we can have, even on the macro level, we can start seeing the numbers starting to dip. So I think it's going to be really, really challenging. So so as for at least, I don't know over there, but over here, it's going to be really, really tough. I don't see when there's any magic money available for the government to actually to keep on propping anything. So I can imagine that now the reality is hit. The businesses have scaled down. People's savings have drawn. The middle class saving has disappeared. So it's going to start hitting it quite hard.
We work with a lot of engineering, manufacturing clients, and also construction. And from talking to the owners, managers there, I know anecdotally there's a lot. Well, whenever the furlough ends, there will be a lot of redundancies, and I think that will obviously slow the whole thing down. So a bit nervous about seeing that when that ends, but it has to end at some stage, obviously.
Robert, the reason I asked the question is, the only debt
Not going to work.
No, we can't hear you, David.
Back in May when we didn't know how things were going to be.
Can you repeat yourself, David? We lost that. No, he's gone.
We'll have to come back to David, as they say on the news.
We'll come back.
£90,000 before it's due. Lots of other people more than that down the road. When you can tell what it is.
David, can you start again? Because we lost all the beginning of that.
Okay. And if I drop out again, just move on with a different topic, and when I'm back in, I'll let you know.
Yeah, cool.
So we know other businesses in other sectors who've kicked a lot of debt down the road, which is going to come back to haunt them in Q4 and more likely into Q1 next year. And we're talking corporation tax bills from last year. We're talking personal tax liabilities and crown debt. So HMRC, PAYE, VAT, all those things. And I'm just wondering whether other people have got a sense of either just in their businesses or if they've heard their customers talking about those kind of issues as well.
I know all I can tell you is what we did for a few months, and now we've started having a plan to make sure we get it up to date by the end of the year, really, so we don't enter into that period but that's I don't know if anyone else is what they're up to.
We've paid off everything.
You've kept yourself.
Absolutely. Not taking loans, paid the VAT, just 'cause I'm old-fashioned and just want to know where I am. But I don't think the situation's as black as you think, as some people say, because I think, sure, there are going to be some sectors that we're exposed to, like tourism, that's going to be not for six. But the tech sector, fintech, all that sort of stuff, I think is still going to be. It won't be growing at 40% per annum, but it's still going to be quite hot.
Yeah, I heard someone call it the other day a K-shaped recession.
Yeah.
The K is it kind of goes like that. There'll be loads of people who do down and then other people go up.
Yeah, I think Martin Sorrell said that. Yeah, very
It'll be him. See, there is a version of the future which is quite optimistic, which has come out kind of via the Economist and a few other people. And a few people heard me say this before, but I'll just rattle through some of these stats. And I know you can select stats, so it kind of means everything and nothing. So Group M, who are the world's largest advertising firm by billing, expect the global ad spending for 2020 will be 10% lower than 2019. So when you look at the 12 months, overall, global ad spending will be down 10% according to them. And they go on to say that despite a slump like no other, ad spending may fall by less this year than the 11% drop that followed the financial crisis in 2009. Add to that, so let's just add the bits to the story. Google's Q2, so to the end of June, the Google revenues on search and ads were down a tad over 10% year on year. So their Q2 was 10% down on the Q2 the earlier year. So that kind of for digital agencies, if you're above that 10%, you're literally above the line. If you're beneath that 10%, you're fine. And if you're in the 10%, it's kind of like the average. And then you've got to look at the actual.
Quite heavily reliant on advertising have really suffered the most.
Well, that's the version that we hear in webinars. That's what's so interesting. And my argument is, as I look around, I kind of probably commune with about 100 odd agencies. There's 50% of agencies above the line and 50% beneath the line. So there's 15% who are doing really, really, really well. There's 35% who are surviving. Those are above the line. And then beneath the line, there's 10% who are dying and 40%, maybe 15% who are dying. And there's kind of 35, 40% that are struggling. And my version with my grey hair is that lots of the strugglers are kind of doing it to themselves because they've never seen a recession before. So they don't know what it's like to have to work really hard for 3 years. They don't know what it's like to work for a year and be in the same place as you were before. They don't know what it's like to see businesses going bust all around them. They don't know what it's like to make people redundant. And there's a kind of another narrative that's going on in parallel to that, which is that lots of agencies I talk to have never been so profitable because they've got rid of all the fat. People aren't sitting around the water cooler chatting, and they've got their good people doing good work for their good clients. So even though revenues have gone down, the revenues have tended to have gone down. That wasn't the most profitable revenue. It was often from the pond life type clients. So a lot of agencies, embarrassingly so, we've just kind of had our best month ever, in terms of profit and dividends we can take out. Anyhow, just going back to this reasons to be cheerful argument. As the dust settles, a reshaped advertising world may appear. So offline ad sellers, long in decline, and the creative agencies, whose middlemen business is being pinched from both sides by the advertiser and the clients, they face gradual extinction. They are no longer fit for purpose. They're like dinosaurs. Dinosaurs. You think about dinosaurs in the Ice Age, not the Ice Age, but think about dinosaurs earlier on. So the prediction from from Moffett Nathanson, another one of these big players, is kind of as follows, or the logic is this: most advertising dollars were pulled in the 2001, so the advertising dollars that were pulled in 2001 and 2009 recessions, they never came back, okay? And that was primarily print and a little bit of TV. Now there's a lot more TV. This time they may return to pre-pandemic levels as early as next year, advertising levels. And they've got a graph which I can share with you, which shows everything. In fact, actually, see if I can, I'll just share my screen with you so you can see the slide. It's that slide there. So you should be able to see that slide. And that comes from The Economist. So US advertising spending as percentage of GDP, they see that as we go from 20 to 24 coming back up, but not to 2000 levels. And this is kind of contra what they say in the drum and contra what they say in Beamer, but it's a viewpoint, a more generalist viewpoint. Another kind of piece in this argument is that digital advertising is the new rent. People are no longer paying, property rent. They're now paying digital rent via digital advertising. And therefore, the place you want to be right now is in and around digital advertising, because digital advertising is the money you have to pay in order to get customers buying from you. And then there's continuing the argument, there's the decline of offline. Offline is suffering at the cost of online. We've all seen these slides loads of times. But I think the difference is in the past downturns, TV advertising did pick up, but this time TV advertising may well not pick up as it did before. Again, that's The Economist. And the other, this is a lot really interesting. This comes from Mary Meeker from Bond. Digital advertising spending right now is incredibly resilient, more than it's ever been before. Because if you look at this graph, okay, what it's showing is consumer time spent on the medium versus where the advertising spending is. And you can see that in 2010, like on the black on the far right, you had, 5% of time was spent looking at print, but 30% of advertising spend was in print. So there was a mismatch of where advertisers were being versus where consumers were. Whereas if you look in 2018, there's an almost perfect match, an almost perfect alignment between where advertising is being spent and where customers are spending time, which means that advertising is more effective, and it also means that's the thing. And if you look at that again, you'll see that 30% of time and advertising is now in the mobile arena, and then there's another 20% on desktop. Roughly 50% of time spent and advertising spend is digital.
Well, but that one's there's a 2-year-old stats, aren't they? On the
that's 2 years old. I totally acknowledge that.
I'm not a bit misleading.
Yeah. I would argue that if that would probably, I would imagine though that the digital thing would be even further.
Yeah, is it what we've seen is a real shift away from mobile to desktop in lots of areas? Because
yeah, totally go with that. About 2 more slides, and then I'll stop. And Moffett Nathanson, again, they're arguing that TV is finally going to crack. Google, Facebook are going to continue to grow, and they have loads of capacity to display more ads, even if that means them switching platforms and going into gaming or going into other lanes of where the digital is. So the kind of conclusion from publicists is the pandemic's been like an asteroid strike, but there are reasons to be cheerful. Earth will survive, but some dinosaurs will die. Agencies are like cockroaches and not like dinosaurs. We scurry around, we figure out the new world. I think the difference between the earlier recessions is that the last 6 months has really accelerated digital transformation. As Ariel suggested, and we all kind of seen that businesses have moved way faster than they ever were expected to get digital in every sense, and that digital advertising therefore is a place to be. It's a pretty sexy place to be, and that's kind of what that's saying, that there are reasons to be cheerful. I just think that we're very sensitive to the B2C world. So the BBC every day, Marks and Spencer's, 7,000 people go bust, Costa Group shutting down a third of their stores, blah, blah, blah. We're very sensitive to that. I don't think, and yet activity is still going on. So I spoke to an influencer agency who have never had themselves so busy. And who are their clients? Their clients are the NHS, they are the UK government, they are passport control, and they're doing cool stuff. And that's a 50, 60 person agency and growing. They're doing cool stuff for those people. So it doesn't have to be that B2C place where digital agencies are doing well. And I think that one of the challenges for us is whether we stick to, we stick to PPC SEO, we stick to digital marketing agency, or whether we do more strategy, do more digital transformation, do more what I call colouring in brand stuff. And I think that's all. This debate has always been thus, but I think that appears now as much as ever.
I kind of like some of that stuff, Rob. I think you're right. We're all in the right business. I think there's some things we're seeing that are kind of puzzling. And so, for example, we work with quite a few manufacturers as well who are kind of trying to go online, and at the moment they're still holding back and not investing because at the moment they can't almost make it quick enough as it is. So they're kind of, they don't want to do more marketing or find any more routes to market because actually they can't get the steel from China, or the assembly line in Italy is not working, or whatever. So that's kind of putting the brakes on some of the stuff for us, which is really frustrating. And then coming back to the K-shaped sort of thing I mentioned earlier, I just went into London last week, and when you look at the massive amount of restaurants and bars and all the different, all those sort of industries that feed off of us tech giant, the tech giants, the banks and all the rest of it, that business is never coming back, let alone the offices are, gonna never come. So those people have got to go. So as much as our money has to go somewhere else, so now we spend it with Tesco online instead of at the coffee shop, those people have lost their income and they've got to go somewhere. So that's the bit that worries me, is that those people have lost their jobs, those businesses would have failed, therefore that money is not swilling around, the money they would normally spend is not in the economy, and that's the bit that worries me.
Okay, so a little bit of
I'm no economist, by the way.
No, two bits of pushback. No, nor am I. Two bits of pushback on that. The first one is the economics textbooks say that supply and demand, and those people will find somewhere else to go, even if they're all on Google courses learning how to do PPC or design websites. But these people will eventually go somewhere. And as you know, as most of you know, I'm quite heavily involved in a chain of 12 cocktail bars, and we went from this fabulous valuation in early March to this pretty poor valuation, by the end of March, and then CBILS kicked in and furloughing kicked in, and then it was like, so you've got to survive 4 months without trading. And now, we are trading in some bars, but what the difference is now, we're trading, our capacity is down to 40% of what it was, but we're trading 4 times the number of hours. So now you're doing breakfasts and lunches and afternoons and evenings. So there's a bit of kind of reframing it, which is, just do the numbers. If you have 100 seats and you're down to 40 seats, if you triple the number of hours, you can serve 120 seats. And does that increase or decrease your variable and direct costs? So I'm not for a minute saying it's easy. but there are some in inverted commas winners.
Yeah, I mean, I'm seeing there's quite a few people who are going to continue the eat out, help out, or half price stuff, aren't they? So it tells you something that, you know, they've found that even if they can keep their Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday busy, it's life changing for them. So.
Yeah, and where we are, I have to say, where we've got a village down the road from us, we've got a delicatessen. Never had it so busy because they're doing home deliveries. We've got a proper old-fashioned organic. That's kind of a proper old-fashioned and organic butcher. Never had it so good, you know. Got buying extra vans to do home deliveries. Hardware store. Everyone's doing DIY. You know, everyone's in there. We've got a cafe which is shut, but they've opened a shed pub, garden, cocktail bar, drinking area behind it. So there is. I'm not. There is movement. There is. Some people are doing okay. In fact, the guy from the delicatessen is totally fed up because he's way too busy. It's like there's not enough hours in the day. Yeah. But going back to David's original question about Q4, my real concern is that in all recessions, the damage is done after the recession. By which I mean, where we are now, that 50% of businesses that are struggling and dying, by now they have maxed out their credit cards, their mortgage holidays as long as it could possibly be. They've downsized the car. They've taken the kids out of private school, and it's still not enough. You know, it's just not enough because there wasn't a decent business there in the first place. Their pockets weren't deep enough. Of a decent biz dev mechanism in the first place, and they're going to run out of runway in Q4. So I think there's going to be loads and loads of businesses going pop in Q4.
Coinciding with the furloughing, just kind of, we can't give you any more money, guys. You know, that's
yeah. So I think it's a really long game, and I think the grey hair argument, you know, when you've been through these kinds of things, you stop looking at the individual little ups and downs day by day, and you start looking at it week by week and month by month. So, you know, I think Q4 is going to be really tough.
One, again, in terms of looking at sort of positives coming out of negatives, the other difference that I've spotted, a couple of my clients are actually in the recruitment business, which you can imagine taken a huge hit in this process, but actually, and interestingly, the ones that both of these two have actually completely reworked their business model. So actually, they are now in the process of rebuilding their business in a way that actually should mean their business is much more sustainable in the future. That's very interesting in its own right. But importantly, they are finding for the first time in a recession that there are an awful lot of people coming free available in the marketplace that would never normally get unstuck, particularly in a recessionary climate. People stay put, they get they're very reluctant to move, and both of these businesses are finding that actually they are persuading their clients to give them exclusive contracts because they can literally guarantee that within 2 weeks they will have a short list of people all of whom can do the job, because a combination of either people fell through the gap at the very early stage, and so they maybe had just been given a job and then they hadn't really started properly, so they fell out of it again, or they are still with businesses but they are concerned about seeing redundancy coming down the line, so actually have decided to move before it happens, you know, and so actually they are looking sooner than they might otherwise. And the other one is actually because they really, really have been pissed off, disaffected by how their businesses have actually performed and behaved as businesses through the period. And literally, he said, so anyone, I know people have been furloughed and have had to make them redundant, but if anyone is looking for some really top skills and capabilities, look now. It'll be a short window, but it's there.
Yeah, we're seeing that with we're recruiting and getting some cracking candidates come forward who like you say, we wouldn't normally expect. I mean, some of the roles, even something like digital project managers, which we really struggle for, we're actually getting decent inquiries for, which is sort of unheard of. So yeah, we're doing that, and equally we're on an acquisition journey as well, because you've got some agencies that are genuinely struggling. We kind of suspected that was the case, and we instructed SI partners, actually M&A guys, to proactively do that. So we drew up a list and a brief, and we've sent out stuff anonymously, and now we're getting some good conversations.
Yeah, we're seeing one of them. I've spoken to someone else in this group, and we're getting roughly 10 requests for agencies to buy to one agency that's actually putting its head above the parapet. And the agencies we're seeing that are saying they'd like to consider being bought or joint ventures and stuff, they're, on the whole, they're not fit for purpose. That's the only way I can describe it.
That's why we're taking that proactive approach, really, is kind of, we've written our own brief, we know what we want, we're looking for, and they are out there. So
yeah, and just you'll be pleased to hear the Bain did a report. I don't normally go on about these kinds of people, but I just happened to be in the same deck that I showed you a minute ago. Dane, in fact, yeah, that's actually quite an interesting. Actually, I'll show it to you. It's quite an interesting. Share screen. Boom. Screen. So they did this piece around what do the high performers do. So those who perform well in a recession perform well after a recession. Those who are the winners are the ones who haven't shut their doors and are aggressively trying to grow themselves. And they grow proportionately faster after the recession if they go through the recession being aggressive in marketing, okay? And all the top line are always the ones who have this resilience or this aggressiveness. This Bain, McKinsey, they all support the same thing. So Bain came up with this pretty little 2x2 matrix. On the up and down is your strategic position about market share, customer, and loyalty, is it strong or weak? And across the bottom is what's your financial strength in comparison with your peers. And actually this kind of fits a conversation that you and I had, Paul, a couple of weeks ago. And so if you're in the bottom left-hand corner, which means you're not very strong in terms of your customer loyalty or your market share, and you've not got any money, it's like, get out, get rid of most of the business, or radically change the cost transformation. If you don't have those deep pockets, but you've got a good bunch of customers and you've got a decent market share, you've got notoriety, then get the cost transformation sorted out and cut the fat, so that you're selling muscle while you're making money. That's kind of logic. That makes sense. Bottom right-hand corner, again, strategic weak position. So your market share, customer loyalty isn't great, but you've got deep pockets. Invest to grow a profitable core, cost transformation, figure out that defensible core and make it happen. And the interesting one is this top right-hand corner, deep pockets, and a strong strategic position, which is proactive acquisitions, invest to enhance the product and the market share, get out there and do stuff and make stuff happen. And so the logic of this is, it's about restructuring, ideally before the downturn, getting the financial house in order. And, if you're a good model agency, you'll have done that in any case. Be offensive about reinvesting for commercial growth. That's about looking for opportunities to deepen your customer relationships, but deepen your skill set. Proactive M&A pipeline, identify M&A targets early, have those conversations and make it happen. Start with the end in mind. Stress test the P&L, manage the costs now. It's all kind of the obvious stuff. But it's the agents, just going back, those charts, these winning companies were all on the front foot, and they were all in an acquisition mode, whereas the losers were stalling. And the same again with this McKinsey stuff. The non-resilients were the ones who just closed down. So there's a kind of you know, the winners win even more, you know, and why would you have a strong financial position going into the recession? Because you were pretty good at business development, you were charging the right prices, so you had deep pockets. So it's kind of the winners win. And I think that the recession just emphasizes the ones that didn't have didn't have the deep pockets, and the reason they didn't have the deep pockets is because they didn't have decent biz dev and pricing strategy. There's a kind of a vicious cycle.
I would actually add to that. Sam, I'm going to have to shoot any second.
Yeah, I could go in a moment.
But I would also add to that. It's also, again, I've encouraged several of my clients to, you know, be really smart about looking at the capabilities and skills that you've got in the business. Look really hard at the shift that's happening. Ariel was talking about, you know, people looking for more strategy, clients coming for more strategy, for example, and ensuring that actually within the business, what you've got is the capabilities that you need to meet the future demands as opposed to what meets the current demands. And it is a really good opportunity to do a sort of it's like a skill, you know, a skills check of what you've got against what you can see you're potentially going to need, with a view to either developing people in the business and or, you know, bringing in people. So sort of being ahead of the curve from a capabilities point of view, because actually, you know, the people in the business are, you know, where the potential is potentially as well. So that's for what it's worth.
Yeah. And we've had 3 months to do it, 4 months to do it.
Yeah, exactly.
You know, and if you haven't done
time to do it.
Yeah.
Mind you, now, but easier to say when you can't quite see where the market's shifting. I think a number of businesses are starting to see a sense of where actually what is the shift in the sort of work or clients that they might be working with. So really good time to do it as you head into the autumn. I've got to go. It's been really nice to see you all. Take care, everybody.
Okay, cool.
Bye.
So any other things people want to discuss or share while we're all online?
I'm just wondering if this trend is going. I'm not quite sure if it's happening. I'm suspecting it might start, or I see a little bit of it. Is as skills are going to start to be available in the market in terms of from companies having, is anyone seeing like in-housing of, for example, as a way to save skills now effectively, like digital skill are a little bit in short supply, or the good ones, and now there's a little bit more availability. So companies, as a way to cutting the cost, they say, well, let's hire someone rather than, because there's more availability. The wisdom of that, I'm not sure, but basically, I'm seeing nothing convincing so far, but it's something I'm trying to watch, at least in the market over here, if it's going to be happening to any extent.
We're starting to see potentially the reverse, where marketing departments are being cut and they've got a smaller team, and now the people that are left are more interested in us filling the gap back up again when they need it as a short-term sort of fix. We tend to send at Sagittarius, we quite often sell our services as a sort of retainer, or, you know, so many hours or days or whatever a month, and then it's so it is genuinely an extension of the team, and that we're sort of starting to see more interest in that, and that's the stuff that's kept us going as well through COVID. Yeah. So I don't know that redundancies is guaranteed to sort of create a sort of a landslide to in-housing. I'm not seeing that anyway yet.
Yeah, I just think that, depending on what cost side. I mean, I'm just looking at the sort of with the bigger cost. What
we're seeing, our pitch is, you know, right, or rather than have to employ an in-house SEO person or PPC or whatever, or a bit of UX or designer, you know, rather than have which you couldn't employ 5 people and trying to buy a sort of jack of all trades, that won't work. Well, why don't you buy a day a week of a SEO specialist, a day a week of a PPC specialist, a day a week of a UX design? You get the best of everything then, and they're regular, they're part of your team, they know your product or whatever, and that's kind of the way we position it anyway.
So I think what's happening is there's people are buying brain power, and then they're buying grunt work, and the brain power bit, you know, they don't necessarily need that 5 days a week. You know, they can probably get away with, depending on how big they are and what the project is, they can get away with, you know, a day a week of that. Grunt work, you know, everyone knows what the day rate for that is, and does it really matter whether that grunt works in-house or not?
Chris Simmons would say you should get a robot to do that.
The big agencies are really suffering because large corporates can take on staff in-house and are increasingly doing so and cutting costs very dramatically. I don't know if anybody's just putting it out to you about whether that perspective is you'll find out as well.
I think that there's a story somewhere of McDonald's buying a marketing agency. You know, it's like why don't we just buy them? Because after all, it's only a 70-person agency.
Yeah.
Buy them and put the golden arches outside, and they can work for us full time. I think obviously there's that opportunity for large people to do that.
So,
And then it's the issue is about how well independent agencies have sold their proposition, which is always going to be about independence, unique, different, understand the marketplace, understand the technology, up to speed, up to date. Isn't it better to have that independent, and you can make the cost savings that we actually offer? Having said that, you know, John Redmond's making a damn good fist of selling in-housing in Modo 25, upsetting lots of people on the way, which is fine. I don't think he minds that. But he's created a really compelling proposition, which is, you know, why would you want to be paying for Paul Stevens' guitar collection, you know, when that money can be going back to your shareholders because you're not having to pay the management fee. And I think it's like that discussion about, you know, pure niche versus generalist agency. It's like one of those discussions which kind of runs hot and cold. And the reality is we're all pretty small, and what we see is our own bubble, for want of a better word, and that's not the same as the whole world. So the 10, 20, 30, 50 clients that we see is the sorts of people who've been attracted to us, who found us attractive, but that's not the real world. Heisenberg's uncertainty principle, the process of looking at something changes the way it behaves.
Applied to marketing.
Applied to marketing, yeah, why not? Cool. Lovely.
okay.
Any more thought bubbles? Anything anyone wants to leave us with as a little thing to actually have a think about?
No, I think actually Ariel and Darty's sort of is that how you say your name, Darty?
Dahi, that's it.
Actually highlights the issue for me is you've got great opportunity at the entrepreneur, new businesses, startup, smaller projects, people going local, like you say. That's a whole sort of swell of change there that's happening. And then Ariel's got it at the other end where you've got big companies who are you know, doing the digital transformation, which is our market as well, though I have to say we haven't been overwhelmed with inquiries, maybe like you have, that I haven't had to get a biz dev person in, and maybe that's something about the maturity of the South African.
Yeah, it's a maturity. Also in terms of the curve that Robert showed earlier. I mean, in South Africa, for example, it's a little bit opposite. It's still like the 10 years ago on the UK in terms of the spending. That's why I'm not too worried for the next 6 months or year because of that shift of money to digital, because it's been overly reliant on where people are not at. You know, the eyeballs had been on mobile and desktop, and the money was still going to traditional. So that shift is accelerating. So digital should be okay here because we are still shifting. So we are. My concern is more long term, and that's also why some of the digital of the wholesaler as well, they've been probably a little bit behind the curve, maybe compared to the
For me, it just sort of highlights as an agency, there's loads of opportunity out there. You've just got to work out what your proposition is going to be and which bit you're going to go for. Because
and if you have a look,
you don't want to be all things to all people, but it's just choosing what it is you want to be. And even though I don't consider myself a cockroach, I kind of feel like I am. We're definitely trying to work it out, and we will come out of it stronger.
There's an interesting interview on the Member Hub with Gary Hamilton. I mentioned it before, from Equator, and what they did about 3 years ago, at about 100 people, they stopped and thought, hey, we need to kind of rethink what we are and who we are and how we keep the engagement. And they switched from being a two-office digital marketing agency to being a digital transformation business that happened to do digital marketing. So of their 180 people, they probably got, I guess, I don't know what it is, but maybe 20 or 30 people doing digital marketing, and everyone else is doing the bigger picture stuff around digital transformation. Partly, I suspect, because there's more money in the strategy head stuff, and partly, I think, because they saw how digital marketing was becoming commoditized, and partly because they just saw, you know, supply and demand. There's an opportunity there. They were big enough and they had big enough clients that they could upsell into those clients going up into the boardroom. It's a really interesting interview. It's a good guy.
So our vision with the acquisitions earlier is, because of this, is to not actually just buy them into such areas, but to let them retain their proposition. So, you know, okay, if we can identify a weakness or maybe an opportunity, but then we feel pulling Sagittarius towards that would possibly damage the proposition we already have, then is do that as a separate brand or do that as part of a group of companies rather than pivot the one we've got.
But what you can bring to them is you can bring, it takes you to get 50 people to understand what good systems, processes, models, pricing, proposal systems is, and you can take your machine or your engine, whatever you want to call it, and you can apply it to businesses that don't have it, and then they're in a better state to do it. Which is kind of what Johnny Twos is doing, isn't he? At Lab.
I believe so. Yeah, I don't really know what he's up to there because he's sort
of... There's an interview with him coming out in September. He reveals all.
Oh, is he? Oh, okay, I look forward to that.
Which is the one you talked about now, Robert? About which interview?
So the first one, they're both on the member hub. Email me if you haven't got access to it.
No, the interview there. What is
first one is Gary Hamilton from Equator, Scottish guy. So that's Glasgow and London. I think 180 people, 200 people. And the second one is Johnny Twos at Lab, which I think is coming out in September. And Johnny is creating a hub or an empire. I'm not sure what the best a group of agencies that have that benefit each other by being part of a larger group. But he's very keen that the agencies maintain their independence, but they benefit from the experience that the mothership has. And I think it's a really healthy model to have. You get the best of both worlds. Otherwise, you get that thing where the Dentsu or Accenture come in and they kill the small business because they just make it a mini me. Not clever. Right. Thank you very much, lady, and gentlemen. Lovely to see you all. Drop me a line if you wish to drop me a line. Have a brilliant, probably wet weekend if you're in the Northern Hemisphere. And see you all very soon. Been great talking to you, and have a great weekend.
Thanks, Rob.
Brilliant. Thank you. Okay. Cheerio. Bye.